everyone. Welcome to Grace Every Day, a podcast for Christian wives of blue collar guys. Today's podcast episode is all about the 7 tips that I have for interviews. So it's a little bit different topic, moving kind of into more of a professional topic today rather than the personal growth. But I think this is really applicable. I get so many people, so many questions on things that I can do in an interview, things that I can do to stand out in an interview, things I can do to get the interview. And this is not just people who are out in the workforce already, but this could be young people. I get a lot of parents who send teens to me and go, well, can you give them some advice on what would you do in an interview? And what are the things they can do to increase their influence in the interview? And these are really great questions. And again, it applies whether you are a teen looking for your first job or an internship, or whether you are in the workforce and have been for quite some time and are just looking to shift into a different position or a different career path. The principles that I'll share with you, of course, apply, whether you're considering applying for a position in a volunteer organization, right? So it's not just limited to a job interview. As always, the principles can apply to a lot of different situations. So digging right in without further ado, first and foremost, this concept Mac first shared with me many, many years ago, and I have used this in every job interview that I've ever done since then, since maybe not the very first one, my very first job interview. Well, actually, the first job that I got, I should say, was where I ended up at Pizza Hut. But I'm pretty sure I've applied this principle to every job application interview that I've had since then. And this is something that you can do on the front end to really increase your influence. You can also do that leading up to the interview to actually get the interview. So lots of different ways to think about this. And it takes a little bit of work, but I'm telling you, this is the number one tip I have that I would share with anyone who's looking to increase influence and get the job, because this will help you stand out. And it's simple. Create yourself a very professional looking binder resume. And I mean, I would get a binder. It doesn't have to be a big binder or an expensive binder. It can be a simple small binder, but I would put color coded sections in there. Again, make it look professional, spend a little bit of time on it, but different sections in there. Not just experience, right? You can put a cover letter in there. You can put the traditional resume, 1 or 2 pages in there. But then I would have a section for things like leadership books that you've read, like The Ladder of Influence or Leadership Gems for Women, or any leadership or personal growth books that you've read. I would have a section in there for, hey, leadership books read, or courses that you've taken, certificates, anything like CPR, certifications, anything that shows where you have put forth work and effort and done something, achieved something, earned something. Because it's not just showing competency, although it does demonstrate a level of competency when you provide those certificates or things. But when you provide a list of books read, leadership books read, for example, that's demonstrating a depth of character. Because first of all, a lot of job candidates aren't reading leadership books. Second of all, even if they are, they may not think to share that as something that shares a lot about their character. It was interesting. Mac and I were doing one of the interviews for his YouTube playlist, the Blue Collar Leadership YouTube channel. The playlist is Real People Getting Real Results. And Mac was interviewing someone on there, one of the high level, I think he was a VP, who had, done some training and done some, used some of Mac's Blue Collar Leadership materials. And anyway, so that was mostly what the interview was about. But again, I think it was a VP. He shared how he interviewed somebody, and it just sort of came out in the interview towards the end that the candidate or the applicant had been a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout. And the guy was like, man, you should have put that on your resume, because that shares that's not just a competency, that shares a lot of information about you and the depth of character that you have to be able to accomplish that, to achieve that. So we don't always think about, of course we think about any relevant skills or experiences. And, these days, I guarantee you, everybody is using AI to make changing a light bulb sound like a 12 step job experience, what's the word I'm looking for, example. But it's not just making things sound good on a resume, right? But demonstrating not just the competency, but also the depth of character. So I would put a section in there with, again, not just certifications, although those are great, but books that you've read, anything that demonstrates that you're a go-getter, right? That you are willing to go the extra mile or go above and beyond. Make a cover sheet for this binder. You can put one on the outside even. Make sure you put one on the inside. And all of those sections that you can think of to demonstrate who you are. Not just what you know how to do, but who you are as a person. Volunteer work, anything like that. Put a sheet with references. Absolutely. Of course, if you're doing a job application these days, you're probably having to list a couple of references. But it's a nice gesture to put them there in the binder as well. Maybe more than the one or two that's required, right? So, and you can get a little more in depth in that. You can list a reference and say, hey, I worked on a volunteer project with this person. And here, so it's not just showing, hey, I can provide some references. It's communicating again, hey, this is what I did with this person. This is the context that I know them. This is why you might want to talk to this person. So that binder, most of the time these days, applications for jobs are going to be online. That's across the board. But you also can create a binder and then you can mail it in. You could FedEx it. You could UPS it. You could send it in the mail. You could drop it by the front desk if it's a local organization. Lots of ways to make yourself stand out with one of these binders. Now, if for some reason you're not able to get it to them and you just put an application online and you do get a job interview, take one of these binders to the interview with you, and that will really help you stand out. I was interviewing for an organization many years ago, and it was scheduled to be 3 1-hour interviews with 3 different people. And it cost a little bit of money, but I put together 3 binders because I wanted to be able to give one to each of the people that I was interviewing with. And I just remember one of them particularly stands out because I got to know her. I did get the job, but I got to know her really well in years later working with her. But I have just such a really great memory of when I walked into her office and sat down for the interview, and I hand her this binder. And she just kind of looks up at me and smiles, and she was like very impressive. And she flipped over, the pages, and she didn't sit down and read everything, but it just, she took a minute to just absorb the fact that, hey, this wasn't just a 1 or 2 page resume. And even cooler, she was just super impressed when I got up to leave and she was going to give it back to me. She's like, here, you can take this to the next person to be interviewed. And I said, no, this one's for you. I've got one for that person as well. Now, of course, if you don't have the skills or qualifications, that's probably not going to help you. You do have to have that competency and that experience or whatever you need to get the job. But this binder trick is the #1 way that you can stand out among other people. And sometimes if you've ever been in a position to hire people, you put a job posting out there and resumes come flooding in or applications come flooding in, and it's very easy for them to all look pretty generic on the receiving end. These days it's all electronic, right? So you just are sitting there, you put a job position posting out there, and you're probably just getting emails of here's an application, here's an application, here's an application. And so if you get like 15 of those or 100 of those, right, you're searching through, digging through, comparing, well, this person has a bachelor's and this person only has an associate's. And so you're trying to just weed out from a lot of generic looking applications. And so this binder trick will, #1 way, help you stand out, help you get that interview or help you stand out in the interview. #2, this one I feel like a lot of people know but don't take seriously enough. Know about the company that you're interviewing for. Know about the position that you're interviewing for. Do your research, do your homework, dig into not just like what does the company do, but know about the company's values. What do they list on their website about their history? What's their background? What's their leadership philosophy? This is going to give you some information to ask some really good questions, some meaningful questions, and not just the standard, well, what are my benefits? Because that's usually what happens is somebody toward the end of the interview, somebody says, well, do you have any questions for me? And you go, well, what are my employee benefits going to be? Right. And that question does not help you increase your influence. Asking questions about why they chose this particular value. Why does their leadership feel that integrity is important? Or, this is going to give you that homework, and that research is going to give you a lot of background to ask meaningful questions and allow you to learn about the company too, right? This isn't just going into an interview trying to get the job as much as you being interviewed. You're just as much as you being interviewed, you are interviewing them, or you should be. So number 2, making sure that you've done your homework and your due diligence. Look on Glassdoor and, do some research and just open forums and see what's out there. Number 3, in the interview itself, assuming you get a chance, ask a question. And this kind of tacks on to number 2, right? If you've done your homework and your research, you've got some information to ask really good, insightful questions with. But number 3, be prepared with those questions. Spend some time on the front end to ask those questions. Now, this is important because it's going to help you, increase the engagement in that interview, give you a chance to increase your influence, and make sure that you're not just going through the motions. Make sure that the person who's interviewing you is not just going through the motions, right? Ask a good, insightful question that says and lets them know, hey, I've done my homework. I am prepared, and I'm not just going through the motions of wanting any job. I'm very particular about the job and the company, the organization that I want to work with, because I have options as a person, and that's really important, right? Number 4, it's been said, you've heard it, but it bears saying again, particularly in these times, because a lot of the teens that I have just been privileged to work with and get to know or mentor have just never really thought about what professional dress looks like. And so number 4, dress nicely, professionally, but appropriate for the role. And that's the key here. Be dressed appropriate for the role, for the position, for the interview itself. Professional, absolutely, but appropriate to the role. You may not need to wear a 3-piece suit and a tie if you're applying for a waitressing job. That might be an extreme example, but you get my point. It's okay to dress appropriately for the role, but be professional. I once interviewed somebody, and it was unfortunate, but the length of the skirt that they chose was just not long enough for the position that they were applying in. And, again, that how you show up and how you dress is saying a lot about who you are as a person. And so you want to be dressed professionally. You don't want to be wearing something that the person has to question, are you going to wear that to work? Because if you wear it to the interview, you'll wear it to the job, right? So be very careful and be very intentional that you are dressed in a professional manner. If you're not sure what that looks like, check, right? Do some homework, do some research on the organization, and, get on YouTube and look for examples of professional dress in that field or that career or that organization. The lack of information is not an excuse these days. These days we have access to so many examples and knowledge and insights that we just have to be intentional about going to find them. Number 5, if you're a handshaker and the opportunity comes up to shake hands in the interview, make sure that you have a firm handshake and not just, I call it limp dish rag hand. But also don't squeeze or crush the person's hand. I think this is fascinating because as a female, as a woman, A lot of times when I'm in a professional environment, or some of the organizations that Mac and I go in to speak at, a lot of times blue collar industries tend to be a little more male dominated. Nothing wrong with that. But I can't tell you how many times someone goes to shake my hand and they just, squeeze it so hard that I'm afraid my jewelry is imprinting into one of us. Yes, you want to have a firm handshake, but you don't want to have that bone crushing handshake where you leave the other person wishing they hadn't shaken your hand, right? So a firm handshake, it's okay to practice this if you're not comfortable with that. Some organizations, some interviews, they don't shake hands, but a lot of times in a professional environment, they will, or they'll wait for you to initiate that contact if you feel comfortable with that. So you kind of have to play that a little bit by ear. But if you are shaking hands with somebody, be firm, but again, avoid squashing their hand like it's a banana peel. Number 6, make eye contact while you're talking with someone. A good rule of thumb here is just a 1 or 2 seconds eye contact and then look away and then look back. Eye contact for a couple of seconds, long enough to register the color of their eyes is what I read somewhere, and I don't remember where I read that, but you don't want to just look and glance away, look and glance away, right? That looks like you're nervous. And you don't want to never make contact because that looks like you're not confident. You also don't want to stare at somebody the entire time because that can make them feel uncomfortable. So make eye contact, but it's okay to look away. And, when you're breaking eye contact, usually look to the side instead of down. Down can come across again as unconfident or as almost submissive. So making good eye contact. If you are in an interview and it's like a panel, you'll want to be intentional about that with everyone on the panel, right? So particularly if one person's speaking and there's 2 other people on the panel, make sure that you're looking at the person who is speaking, right? Be respectful with that. But eye contact can go a long way toward increasing your influence and expressing your confidence in yourself, in who you are as a person. And number 7, last but not least, be prepared to answer questions like, tell me about a time when you made a mistake. I shouldn't have to say it, but number 1, everyone has an example of a mistake they've made. Be prepared about what you want to share in response to that question. If you say, hey, I can't think of anything, gosh, I just don't know when the last time I made a mistake was, that is not going to increase your influence in that interview. We've all made mistakes. We all can take, a look back and go, oh yeah, I've made a mistake, right? The question isn't really, have you ever made a mistake? Because everyone knows the answer to that. The person who's asking that type of question wants to know, number 1, do you own it? Number 2, what did you learn from it, right? This is one of those questions that just kind of gives them a snapshot or a glimpse into your character. And so this type of question, it's one of the better or more well-known questions or tools to ask when you're interviewing somebody, because you can't, you can to some degree judge somebody's character in a 15-minute interview, but it's difficult to really get to know the person in that little time. So questions like this are designed to just kind of give you a glimpse into their character, not just what happened when they made a mistake, but did they own it? What did they learn from it? Are they holding themselves accountable, or are they blaming somebody else or throwing somebody else under the bus? So think about that on the front end, because this is a really great opportunity to share a lot about yourself and what you've learned and how you've grown since then. So, only you can decide what scenario is best to share, but spend some time thinking about that. And, focus on the lesson learned. Focus on what you came away with, what you would do different next time. But I guarantee you, if it's any kind of in-depth interview, you're going to get at least one question like that. So be prepared to share that. Again, these questions are just someone who's trying to get a feel for you, who you are as a person. This is just one of the tools that are popular in terms of, well, this is something I know I can ask. Let me just see how they respond. And, again, it's not so much as just the fact that you have something to share, is how you share it. Are you comfortable taking ownership of that mistake? Sharing what you've learned from it, sharing how you've grown since then. What would you do differently? So think about that and put some thought into that before you get into that interview environment and you're left going, yeah, well, last week I messed up, blah, 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 right? Because this is really an opportunity to share who you are. A lot of about you and your character is how you've handled things that go wrong, right? Everybody can handle the things that go right and be positive and proactive about it. It's, were we still positive and proactive when things went wrong, when we made a mistake, when something spiraled out of control? And how did we fix it? How did we repair it? Opportunities where you fixed a customer service incident, anything like that you choose to share can say a lot about who you are as a person and can really increase your influence in that job interview or internship interview. I know this season right now, it's a lot of people are graduating high school and graduating college and getting ready for summer job applications, internships. And again, you might just be thinking of shifting your career. These are just the top 7 interview tips that I would share. So remember, life is tough, but God's grace is always enough. Until next time.